Do you hear it? The echoes of the past, the whispers of forgotten truths, fragments of memories lost in the shadows. Welcome to BRAINROT, Echoes, where we bring you stories long buried, unravel mysteries cloaked by time, and guide you through the darkest corners of the mind and the universe. Each video is more than just content. It's an echo resonating deep within, urging you to question, to wonder, to explore. Backend index pointing right, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us in listening to the echoes the world tried to silence. Why did we lose the war? You want to know why we lost the war? The grizzled curve veteran's mandibles clicked in agitation as he nursed his drink. I'll tell you why we lost. We never stood a chance against those psychological primates. The young reporter leaned forward, her antennae twitching with interest. She'd heard rumors about the infamous Human-Kax'thar conflict, but first-hand accounts were rare. Most preferred veterans to forget. But surely, the Empire's military superiority. She began. Military superiority? The veteran laughed, a harsh chittering sound. Let me explain something about humans in warfare. You think you understand violence. You think you understand combat. You don't know. He took another long drink, compound eyes reflecting the dim light of the space station bar. Here's what you need to understand about them. Humans turned warfare into an art form long before they ever left their gravity well. While we were perfecting plasma weapons and energy shields, you know what they were doing? They were finding increasingly creative ways to kill each other with sharpened metal and refined explosives. But that's so primitive, the journalist protested. Primitive? He slammed his drink down. Let me tell you about primitive. During our first engagement with human forces, we deployed state-of-the-art battle formations, perfect geometric patterns optimized by our finest military AIs. You know what they did? They looked at our perfect formations and laughed. Then they started throwing rocks at us. Rocks. Not just any rocks. Tungsten rods dropped from orbit. Do you have any idea what happens when you drop a telephone pole-sized chunk of metal from space? They call it rods from God. Pure kinetic energy. No radiation. No fancy energy signatures to detect. Just death from above. The journalist's antennae drooped. But surely our superior numbers. Numbers? Another harsh laugh. Oh, that's the best part. We thought the same thing. We had them outnumbered 10-1. But you know what humans are really good at? Fighting outnumbered. They've got this whole mythology built around it, turning what should be a disadvantage into a sport. While we were developing combat doctrines based on pure logic and efficiency, they were creating things called video games that simulated combat in increasingly complex ways. By the time we encountered them, their civilian population had spent more time thinking about tactical combat scenarios than our military strategists. But that's just simulated, the journalist argued. Surely actual combat is exactly what they've been preparing for their entire existence. Every human child grows up playing war games, capture the flag, paintball, laser tag. They turn combat into entertainment. And that's not even the scariest part. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. The scariest part is their creativity. We thought we understood warfare. We had it down to a science. Perfect formations, optimal weapon configurations, carefully calculated risk assessments. But humans look at a battlefield and see possibilities. What do you mean? During the Battle of Imus and Torai, we had their fleet cornered. Superior numbers, superior positioning, superior fire pover. By every tactical calculation, they were finished. You know what they did? They intentionally detonated their own antimatter reactor containment fields to create a massive electromagnetic pulse, frying their own systems along with ours. Then, while both fleets were dead in space, they launched boarding parties using primitive chemical rockets. He shuddered. Do you know what it's like to be in a state-of-the-art warship, surrounded by the most advanced technology in the galaxy, and watch humans in mechanical pressure suits cut through your hull with thermal lances? Not plasma cutters, not energy beams, literally just really hot metal. And they were singing while they did it. Singing some ancient war song, Blood Upon the Risers, I think they called it. Something about parachutes failing. They have songs about their troops dying horribly, and they sing them to boost morale. What kind of species does that? The journalist's mandibles twitched nervously. But surely there are technological limitations. See, that's where everyone gets it wrong. We thought their primitive technology was a weakness. But humans don't see technology the way we do. To them, technology is just another tool in the toolkit. They'll use plasma rifles alongside ballistic weapons, quantum computers alongside mechanical systems, analog, whatever works, whatever gets the job done. He gestured expansively. You know what really drives the point home? Their language. They've got this saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat. First time I heard that, I had to ask for clarity. Turns out it's an idiom about problem solving. But think about that for a moment. They've got a common saying about multiple methods of removing an animal's hide. That's the kind of species we were dealing with. But we had better ships, better weapons. Better ships? Let me tell you about human ships. While we were building elegant vessels with perfect symmetry and optimal energy distribution, humans were basically strapping engines to giant chunks of metal. They weren't elegant. They were brutal, over-engineered monsters designed to take a beating and keep fighting. They didn't even bother with proper energy shielding on their smaller vessels. Just slapped on layers and layers of armor and called it good enough. He took another drink. And their weapons? Sure, we had more advanced energy weapons, but you know what humans brought to the fight? Everything. Literally everything. Energy weapons, projectile weapons, kinetic kill vehicles, chemical weapons, biological weapons. If it could hurt someone, they'd weaponized it. They even weaponized information, mimetic warfare, psychological operations. They didn't just want to defeat us militarily. They wanted to break our will to fight. They studied our culture, our social structures. Then they used that knowledge against us. Started spreading rumors, stories, urban legends, created doubt, fear, uncertainty. By the end of the war, we had troops surrendering because they'd heard humans could smell fear and would give you a quicker death if you didn't resist. The journalist's antennae twitched rapidly. But that's ridiculous. Of course it was ridiculous. But that's the thing about humans and warfare. They don't care about ridiculous. They care about effectiveness. If something works, they'll use it, no matter how strange or primitive it might seem. He drained his glass. But you want to know the real reason we lost? The absolute fundamental reason why humans are unbeatable in warfare? Why? Because they enjoy it. Not the killing, not the death. Well, some of them do, and those ones are terrifying. But the challenge, the problem-solving, the strategy and tactics. They treat warfare like a game, like a puzzle to be solved, and they're really good at solving puzzles. He gestured to the bartender for another round. You know what they did after we surrendered? They invited our military leadership to something called a paintball tournament, said it would be good for building post-war relations. So there we were, the highest-ranking survivors of our military, getting shot at with balls of color dye by laughing humans who treated the whole thing like some kind of party game. That's disturbing, the journalist said. Disturbing doesn't begin to cover it. You know what their civilian population was doing during the war? Building model replicas of our ships and vehicles for entertainment. Creating simulated battles in their video games. Writing speculative fiction about different ways the war could have gone. Their entire society is geared towards thinking about, analyzing, and enjoying conflict. He leaned back, compound eyes reflecting the starlight visible through the station's viewport. So, you want to know why we lost the war? Because we were fighting soldiers while they were fighting warriors. We were fighting with science while they were fighting with art. We were fighting because we had to, while they were fighting because they'd spent their entire existence waiting for a chance to prove themselves against an alien enemy. The journalist was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she asked, "Do you think they'll ever change? Become more civilized?" The veteran chittered with dark amusement. Civilized? They're civilized. That's what makes them so dangerous. They've managed to maintain their warrior spirit while building a sophisticated civilization. They've got ballet dancers who practice martial arts, scientists who play war games in their spare time, politicians who hunt for sport. Their entire culture is built around the idea that you could be both civilized and dangerous. He gestured to a group of humans at the other end of the bar who were cheerfully arm wrestling while placing bets. Look at them right now. They're just having fun, engaging in friendly competition. But, but I've seen what happens when you push them too far. When you threaten their worlds, their people, their way of life. They stop being civilized real quick. And then you see why every species that's ever fought them has ended up either dead or surrendering. And what's that? Because humans don't just practice warfare, they don't just study it, they don't just enjoy it, they transcend it. They turn violence into art, conflict into dance, battle into symphony. They're the gods of war, and the rest of us, we're just fumbling around with basic arithmetic while they're composing grand operas of destruction. He finished his drink and stood up, mandibles clicking softly. So next time someone tells you humans are primitive because they still use projectile weapons, or backwards because they maintain standing armies, or uncivilized because they enjoy combat sports, remember this conversation. Remember that every piece of primitive technology they keep around is because they found a use for it that our advanced civilization never considered. Remember that their backwards military traditions have been honed by millennia of constant warfare. And remember that their uncivilized love of competition is what drives them to constantly innovate and improve. The veteran headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. If you ever find yourself in a fight with a human, surrender immediately. Because if you don't, they'll take whatever you're fighting with, figure out how it works, improve upon it, and then use it against you. And they'll probably be humming a cheerful tune while they do it. With that, he chittered one last time and left the young reporter to contemplate the implications of a species that had turned warfare into an art form, and why that made them the most terrifying warriors in the known galaxy. The humans at the end of the bar were now singing something about a grand old Duke of York who had 10,000 men. The journalist decided she didn't want to know the rest of the lyrics. Some questions were better left unanswered. A different perspective. The journalist was about to leave when one of the humans from the singing group approached the bar next to her. He was wearing what appeared to be a formal military uniform, though the abundance of colorful ribbons and medals seemed almost gaudy to her Kerr sensibilities. "Couldn't help but overhear some of your conversation," he said casually, ordering something called a whiskey. "Your friend that got some things right, but he missed the best parts." Her professional curiosity got the better of her. "Best parts?" The human grinned, and she noted with mild alarm that humans showed teeth when expressing amusement, a gesture that would signal impending violence in most civilized species. "Oh yeah. See, your veteran friend there? He only saw us during wartime. That's like watching the finale of a performance without seeing any of the rehearsals." He settled onto a bar stool, and the journalist found herself unconsciously leaning away from his casual confidence. "Did you fight in the war?" she asked. "Me? Nah, I was just a kid then. But I've studied it. We all have. It's required learning now. How not to start an interstellar war 101. He chuckled, though honestly it should be called how to end one really quickly if someone else starts it. He gestured to the stars visible through the viewport. "Look out there. You know what most species see? Resources, territory, strategic positions. You know what humans see? Every science fiction story we've ever written. Every space battle we've ever imagined. Every heroic last stand and desperate gambit and clever strategy we've ever dreamed up." The human's expression grew serious. "But you want to know the real kicker? The thing that truly makes us dangerous. What's that? We don't actually want to fight. We prepare for war constantly, obsessively. But our greatest heroes are the ones who find ways to avoid it. We celebrate the commanders who win without fighting, the diplomats who prevent conflicts, the leaders who maintain peace." He finished his drink. "That's what makes us the gods of war. We understand it well enough to know when not to use it. Your veteran was right about us turning warfare into an art form. But he missed the most important part. Like any true artist, we know that our greatest works often come from choosing not to create at all." The human stood up, straightening his uniform. "That's why we're here now, drinking together in this bar instead of shooting at each other in space. Because as much as we excel at warfare, we're even better at figuring out ways to avoid it." He smiled again, and this time the journalist didn't flinch at the sight of teeth. "Just remember, the only thing humans love more than a good fight is a good reason not to have one." With that, he returned to his companions, who were now attempting to sing something about 99 bottles of beer on a wall. The journalist looked down at her notes, then up at the stars, and finally understood why humans were considered the gods of war. It wasn't because they were the best at fighting, it was because they were the best at understanding why not to. She had her story, but somehow she suspected it wasn't the one she had originally set out to write. Behind her, the humans started singing again, this time something about a buffalo soldier in the heart of America. She decided that some songs, like some species, were best appreciated from a safe distance, preferably from behind several layers of reinforced armor, just to be safe. When humans get angry. As the journalist processed the human officer's words, she noticed something odd about the bar's atmosphere. The ambient noise had shifted. The singing had stopped. She turned to see what had caused the change and found the human group staring at a news broadcast on the vidscreen. Breaking news. Pirates had attacked a civilian transport near the Carina Nebula. Not just any transport. A refugee ship carrying children from the war-torn Riel sector. The change in the humans was immediate and dramatic. Gone were the smiles, the casual postures, the friendly banter. Their expressions had turned to stone, and the journalist felt a primitive shiver run down her thorax. This, she realized, was what the veteran had tried to warn her about. A new human nearby her table, female this time, wearing civilian clothes but moving with an unmistakable military bearing, sat down without asking. "You want to know why we're really the gods of war?" the woman asked, her voice quiet but intense. "Watch what happens next." "What do you mean?" "Those pirates, they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They broke one of humanity's fundamental rules. You have rules for warfare." The woman's laugh was nothing like the earlier humans' friendly chuckle. It reminded the journalist of the sound ice makes when it cracks. "We have rules for everything. Codes of conduct, laws of war, Geneva Conventions, rules of engagement. But some rules," she nodded towards the screen, "some rules are written in our DNA." The journalist watched as the humans in the bar began making calls, sending messages, coordinating with an efficiency that seemed at odds with their earlier revelry. "See, most species think we're dangerous because we're good at fighting," the woman continued. "But that's not it at all. We're dangerous because we have lines that shouldn't be crossed. And when someone crosses those lines," she smiled, and the reporter suddenly understood why some species considered human smiles to be threat displays. "The veteran you spoke to, he saw us during a regular war. The officer, he knows our history, our preparation, our potential. But neither of them showed you what happens when humanity gets truly angry." On the screen, reports were coming in of multiple naval vessels changing course towards the Carina Nebula. Not just human ships, but willing vessels from every major power in the sector. The journalist's antennae twitched in surprise. "Our alliances. Another thing we're good at," the woman explained. "When humanity goes to war, we don't just bring weapons. We bring friends, allies, partners. Because we learned a long time ago that the strongest warrior isn't the one with the biggest guns. It's the one with the most people to stand beside them." She gestured to the screen. "Right now, every nation that signed the Terran Accords is mobilizing. Not because they have to, but because they know that if they ever need help, humanity will remember who stood with us." "But it's just pirates. Just pirates." The woman's expression darkened. "They attacked children, refugees, the helpless, the innocent. Do you know what that means in human terms?" The journalist shook her head. "It means the rules just changed. When we fight a regular war, we have restrictions, limitations on ethics. But when someone targets children..." She pointed to the screen where more ships were appearing. "That's when you see why we're called gods of war." The human officer from earlier appeared beside their table. "Task forces assembled. We're getting reports of similar groups forming in 3 other sectors. Someone's been keeping tabs on these pirates for a while." "Of course they have," the woman replied. "We never forgot." "Never forgot what?" The journalist's professional instincts kicked in. The two humans shared a look. The officer spoke first. 3 years ago, these same pirates hit another transport. We couldn't prove it was them, but we knew. So we watched, waited, gathered intelligence, built networks, made friends. And now, and now, the journalist asked. The woman's smile was terrifying in its calmness. Now they've given us an excuse, a justification, a reason. And that's when humans are at their most dangerous, when we can act with full moral authority. On the screen, the first reports of engagement were coming in. The journalist watched in amazement as ships from a dozen different species moved in perfect coordination, cutting off escape routes, isolating pirate vessels, executing maneuvers that seemed impossible for such a diverse fleet. How are they working together so smoothly? Because we trained them, the officer said proudly. After the war, we shared our knowledge, weapons, our techniques, our experience. Not everything, of course, we're not stupid, but enough. Because we learned that the only thing better than being good at warfare is having allies who are good at it too. And who trust you, the woman added. Trust is more powerful than any battleship. The journalist watched as the operation unfolded with ruthless efficiency. Within hours, the pirates were cornered, the refugee ship was secured, and then, "Wait," she said. "They're offering the pirates a chance to surrender?" "Of course they are," the woman said. "That's rule one of human warfare. Always offer a chance to surrender. Always provide an out. Because the goal isn't to destroy your enemy." "It's not." "No," the officer replied. "The goal is to make sure they never want to fight you again. And sometimes the best way to do that is to show mercy when you have every right not to." The journalist watched as most of the pirate ships surrendered. A few tried to fight, a few tried to run. None succeeded. And that, the woman said, standing up, is why we're the gods of war. Not because we're the strongest or the most advanced or the most brutal, but because we understand that true power isn't about winning fights. It's about choosing which fights are worth winning and how to win them in ways that prevent future fights. She straightened her civilian jacket, and the journalist suddenly realized why her bearing had seemed military. The woman's clothes might be civilian, but the way she carried herself screamed admiral. "One last lesson about humans in warfare," the admiral said. "We're not just good at fighting wars, we're good at ending them. Sometimes with violence, sometimes with mercy, sometimes with a combination of both, but always with purpose." The officer nodded in agreement. The pirates thought they could get away with it because they didn't understand humanity's rules. They thought that because we sing and drink and play games, we're not serious about warfare. They forgot, the admiral concluded, that gods can be both merciful and terrible. And humanity, we've had a lot of practice at being both. The journalist looked back at the screen, where the combined fleet was now escorting the captured pirate vessels to the nearest starbase. The refugee ship was being attended to by medical vessels from 3 different species, and humanity had once again demonstrated why they were considered the gods of war. Not through superior technology, not through greater numbers, not even through better tactics, but through something far more powerful, the ability to unite others in a common cause, to fight with both fury and restraint, and to turn potential enemies into lasting allies. The humans in the bar had resumed their singing, but this time it was different. This time they sang something older, deeper, more meaningful, a song about amazing grace and how sweet the sound. The journalist had heard humans sing several times that night, but this was the first time she understood why they did it. Sometimes, even gods need to remind themselves of mercy. The wall of memory. The pirate incident had drawn quite a crowd to the station's bar. The journalist noticed a group of younger aliens, students by their markings, gathering around an elderly human wearing what appeared to be some kind of ceremonial uniform. Unlike the active military personnel, his uniform was adorned with aged medals and weathered insignia that spoke of conflicts long past. "Is it true," one of the students asked, "about the great memorial?" The old human's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Ah, you're wondering about how we remember our wars." The journalist herself found herself drifting closer, data pad at the ready. This was an aspect of human warfare she hadn't considered, how they preserved their martial history. "On Earth," the veteran began, "there's a wall. A simple thing, really. Black stone, polished to a mirror finish. On our names. Just names. Tens of thousands of them. People go there to touch the names, to make rubbings on paper, to leave flowers and medals and letters. But why? A young Centauran asked. Why remember the dead this way? Because every name has a story, the old human replied. Every single one. We don't just remember our victories, you see. We remember our losses, our sacrifices, our mistakes. That's another thing that makes us different. The admiral from earlier appeared silently, taking a seat nearby. The old man nodded to her in acknowledgement before continuing. Most species build monuments to their victories, statues of great generals, memorials to decisive battles. We do that too. But, he paused, taking a sip of his drink, we also build monuments to our failures, to our losses, to the cost of war itself. But why? Another student asked. Why remember defeat? Because that's how you learn, the admiral interjected. That's how you make sure it doesn't happen again. Every name on that wall is a lesson written in blood. The old man nodded. We have a saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. But for humans, remembering isn't just about facts and figures. It's about stories, emotional connections. He pulled something from his pocket, a small metal object on a chain. This belongs to my grandfather. He fought in what we call World War II. Just one of millions. When I was a kid, he didn't tell me about the victories. He told me about the friends he lost, the horrors he saw, the cost of war. That seems counterproductive, one of the students observed. Wouldn't that discourage warriors? The admiral laughed softly. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it has the opposite effect. Because when humans go to war, we don't just carry weapons, we carry memories. Lessons learned in blood and fire. Every human warrior, the veteran continued, carries the weight of those who came before. Not just their victories, but their sacrifices, their losses, their pain. It makes us better warriors because it makes us understand the cost of warfare. The journalist's antennae twitched with interest. Is that why humans seem to approach warfare differently than other species? Partly, the admiral said. Most species view war as a means to an end, a tool, a necessity. We view it as a story that's still being written. Every battle, every conflict, every war, they're all chapters in a book that began when the first human picked up a rock to defend their tribe. And we're still writing it. Still adding chapters, still learning, still remembering, the veteran added. One of the students gestured to the news feed, still showing updates from the pirate incident. Is that why everyone responded so quickly? Because of memories? Exactly, the admiral said. When we saw that refugee ship being attacked, we didn't just see a current event. We saw every refugee ship that's ever been attacked, every innocent that's ever been harmed, every time someone thought they could prey on the weak and get away with it. We remember, the veteran said softly. We always remember. But it's more than that, the admiral continued. We also remember every time someone stood up to protect the innocent, every time different species came together for a common cause, every time mercy was shown when vengeance would have been easier. The veteran held up his grandfather's dog tags. These remind me of something important about human warfare. We don't fight because we love war. We fight because we remember what happens when good people do nothing. And that, the admiral added, is why we train so hard, why we prepare so thoroughly, why we build alliances and share knowledge. Because we remember every time we weren't ready, every time we were too slow, every time we failed to protect those who needed protection. The journalist looked at her notes, then at the assembled group. So humans are gods of war, not just because of how you fight, but because of how you remember. How we learn, the veteran finished. How we carry the weight of every conflict, every loss, every victory, every sacrifice. The admiral stood, straightening her civilian clothes. That's why those pirates never stood a chance. Not just because we had superior forces or better coordination, but because every human who responded carried with them the memories of every other time someone tried to prey on the innocent, and the mercy offered to the survivors. Also because we remember, one of the students asked, we remember what happens when victory becomes vengeance, when justice becomes cruel, the veteran said. We remember because we have to. Because if we forget, we risk becoming what we fight against. The news feed showed the last of the pirate ships being escorted to the starbase. The refugee ship was safely docked, its passengers being cared for by a multi-species medical team. So you see, the veteran concluded, being gods of war isn't about being the best at fighting. It's about being the best at remembering why we fight when to fight, and most important, when not to. And when we do fight, the Admiral added, we carry with us every lesson, every story, every sacrifice that came before. It makes us better warriors, not because it makes us stronger or faster or more skilled, but because it makes us understand the true cost of warfare. And that understanding, the veteran finished, makes us both more terrible in battle and more merciful in victory. The students absorbed this in silence. The journalist looked at her notes, realizing she now had enough material for not just one article, but an entire series. Behind them, the humans in the bar had started singing again, but this time it was different. A slow, mournful tune about poppies growing in fields where soldiers had fallen long ago. The journalist understood now. Humans weren't just gods of war because of how they fought. They were gods of war because they never forgot why they fought or what it cost.